Bob Flounders here with Greg Pickel. We're about a week away from the Penn State blue-white game, Greg, here on a Saturday, and James Franklin just met with us. He feels a lot better, I think, about the team with a week to go than he did at this point last year. He touched on some of the things he really feels good about. One of the things he said was the defensive end position.
Right.
You know, they lost Olanian, they lost Barnes, but he likes what he sees from the guys that are coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at this team, I think that, you know, there was a lot of concern about what they were going to do at defensive end, considering who they had to replace. But he likes Carl Nassib and he likes Torrance Brown, and obviously there's a couple other guys there too that have caught his eye. But when you look at those two guys, you know, they're sort of the two that are standing out to him right now. And then, you know, and as far as it, you know, relates to questions about this team, he said there's less. And you know, when you look at the depth chart, there are. I mean, when you look across the board here, you know, he mentioned running back and tight end and linebacker is an issue, but you know, depth is really the concern, as well as who's going to protect Christian Hackenberg's blind side.
Yeah, and it looked like he was a little bit of a mixed signals with the offensive line. He's encouraged, but he also, I thought, pumped the brakes a little bit with Paris Palmer, the left tackle. A lot of people assume he's going to be the guy, but he said he's a lot like where guys were at this point last year. He also pointed out he still needs to get bigger. He's in the 285-pound range, which is normally good, but when you're 6'8", it's not that great. He'd like to see him at 305, 310, but it sounds like he's a little bit more encouraged with the offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he, you know, that this group has taken a step forward. I don't know necessarily if that step forward is, you know, exactly where they want it to be, or if it's as long as they want it to be. But yeah, you know, I think that there's plenty of time left for this group. But really, you know, this team is going to go as far as its line goes. I think it's just like it was last year. If the line's you know, a tangled together mess again, you know, it's going to be trouble in paradise. And I think that, you know, we'll find out a lot, you know, when we see Paris Palmer again this summer. He has, you know, what do you say, 300, 305 is what he would like him to be at. You know, in an ideal world, he's probably at 320 or so, but that's just not going to happen this year.
A couple of notes. He mentioned a couple of players that were limited this spring. One of them is Naeem Wortman, who's a guy I think that James ideally wants to be his middle linebacker to replace Mike Cole. I don't think he's worked in a little while. There's a little bit of concern there. The other person, when asked, where he said he's been limited, so you wonder about his spring, has been Adam Brenneman. He talked about tight end depth. If he's limited, that means they're going to need a lot more, I think, from Mike Gesicki and Kyle Carter.
No question about it. I mean, I think that when you look at Penn State's tight end production from a year ago, you know, they did get some decent numbers out of Jesse James, but if this group doesn't block, they're not going to be on the field. But if they don't, you know, produce, they're not going to be on the field either. And I think there's a lot of that has to do with playing in the run game and then using what you get from playing in the run game to playing in the passing game. The tight ends didn't do that a whole lot outside of James last year. And Brenneman's a guy that I think can do that, but if he's not on the field, then yeah, you need your other two to step up, no doubt about it.
One last thing real quick, he was talking about running backs. They had 3 redshirt freshmen in camp this year. They were redshirted last year. It sounds like one of them has kind of jumped out. He mentioned him by name, Mark Allen.
Right, yeah. Mark Allen's a guy that we saw during the scrimmage action today. He looks pretty good, and he's small. I mean, there's no doubt about his size, you know, but he's a kid that, you know, we've heard his name now a couple times this spring, and when you look at, you know, what he's able to do, he was shifty at DeMassa Catholic before he hurt his knee. There was a kid, I can't remember who anymore, that jumped ahead of him and went to a Big 12 school, I believe, once Mark Allen hurt his knee. But this kid always had a lot of potential, and he's definitely a guy that I think can, you know, spell Akeel Lynch, who's more of a bruiser, and he's not going to run away from you.
He's Greg Pickel. I'm Bob Flounders. We're a week away from the blue-white game. We'll see you then.